After watching the stream on the Distributist channel with Carl Benjamin, I find myself thinking further upon the issue of religion. I congratulate myself that Distributist is apparently conceding that a religion of ethical monotheism is required, and it won't be Christianity, even though he, in his half-hearted way, tried to interest Sargon in Catholicism. It's all a bit convoluted to people who don't know the details of Toryism and Whiggery in English history, but the long and short of it is that the Tories were more Catholic and the Whigs were more in favour of religious tolerance. And so this is a politics of a bygone era when whether one was the right kind of Christian was very controversial, and indeed you could lose your life over whether you were Catholic or Anglican, and hence the particular preoccupations of the time. But now nobody believes in God, let alone whether their country should be Christian or what kind of Christianity they should embrace or follow. So these questions are now completely anachronistic and redundant. But it seems the Distributist, who I learned from his stream yesterday, comes from an atheist background and converted to Catholicism. Now, the problem with people who convert to any kind of religion without making the proper inquiries is that they become even more reluctant to admit that they're wrong. I mean, it's bad enough admitting that the religion of your parents and your ancestors is wrong. It's another thing to admit that you, thinking you were making a rational decision, have got it wrong again. But never mind. As long as you get it right in the end, it's better than not correcting your mistakes, isn't it? So, the mistake that is easy to make, I suppose, is, if you're white and Western and you hate intersectionality and you reject liberalism, you have to, and you hate Muslims, you have to, go back to a time when your ancestors were more successful and more highly regarded than they are now, and that would mean, being Christian. And then a lot of these Christian nationalists fantasize about being Knights Templar when they would go on their crusades and exterminate large numbers of Jews and Christians, and this they associate with Christian greatness. But this is a childish and obviously vengeful fantasy, which should be discouraged at all costs. If you look at Christian history dispassionately, you will know that they are the most violent religious group of all. None of the other four world religions had a religion that had a continent-wide wars of religion. So we have heard of the European wars of religion, and they went on for hundreds of years, and that they are also known as the Wars of the Reformation. And there is also an English Reformation, because Henry VIII wrote from Rome when he decided to reject the authority of the Pope in telling him whom he could or couldn't marry. But all these problems would have been neatly avoided if he had been Muslim. All Henry wanted to do was not to leave his kingdom in the charge of a daughter. And he would have thought that being a king, he could, well, manage to sire a son in short order, but not a bit of it. So when he managed to get his first marriage to Catherine of Aragon annulled, she hadn't done anything wrong. He just wanted to pretend that he never married her so he could marry again, Anne Boleyn. And there was a question too of whether, if it is true that the marriage between Henry and Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, never took place, because that is what an annulment is. An annulment is pretending that you were never married to that person. So of course it was deeply humiliating for Mary, for Catherine, and particularly when she had given him a daughter called Mary, who turned out to be Bloody Mary, who executed all those Anglicans. Now, if Henry had been Muslim, then it would have been all right, if Catherine was too old to try again after only giving him a daughter. He could have, taken a second wife, Anne Boleyn, and if she did indeed commit incest and was rightfully executed, then he could have had a third wife, which was Jane Seymour, who eventually gave birth to a son called Edward, who, unfortunately for the kingdom of Henry, didn't survive adolescence. He died when he was 15. So it was a little bit unfortunate that Henry couldn't quite manage to leave his kingdom in the charge of a male heir of his. I was going to talk about the annulment of, returning to the subject of the annulment of the marriage between Henry and Catherine. Certain issues arose if you get your marriage annulled and you have children. I mean, what was to become of Mary? Would she become retrospectively a bastard? Apparently not. So it already doesn't make sense, So if you were never properly married to somebody, then all your offspring would be bastards, right? All of your offspring of your marriage that was annulled, which meant it never took place, would mean that they would all be illegitimate. But somehow, I don't know the details. Henry wangled it that he didn't sire a bastard called Mary, and she was regarded as legitimate for all practical purposes. But this is the kind of legal and moral confusion that was caused by a Christian and Catholic king. Unfortunately, these difficulties have continued over the centuries. The problem of Christianity. I know the subject of the stream is the greater achievement, is a question of who managed to get the greater, The title of his stream is on the question of whether it was Muhammad or Jesus who had the greater achievement. So the greatest achievement of Jesus is that he managed to get all those people called Christians over 2,000 years to worship him as a divinity. Um, is this something to die for? Who knows? I mean, I'm sure there are people who would be prepared to die in order to be worshipped because their ego would find it satisfying to get all those gullible Gentiles to worship a mortal man as if he were the co-equal of the supreme and eternal Abrahamic God who created the universe. It's a supreme and divine practical joke that I imagine a narcissist would be gloating over. It's like I got all those people to worship me, and some of them still want to worship me as the co-equal of the God that created the universe. How dumb is that? Just a moment. I've got to go and answer the doorbell. Back in a minute. Right, I'm back. Now, where was I? Can people remind me where I was at? So yes, I was saying, if you're a vandal, if you're a spiritual vandal, and you think, oh, if I can just make these stupid people worship me as the co-equal of the God who created the universe, for 2,000 years, you made them worship you as the co-equal of the God who created the universe. You know, okay, I mean, maybe they're just stupid or retarded or suffering from a learning disability or something, but it's still, you know, an achievement, isn't it? Even if it's because, people are so gullible and, so unquestioning, right? So the jury's still out, I suppose, if you want to be, this spiritual vandal, if you want to lead the whole world astray. After all, the three global empires have been Christian, so, it's been done 3 times, right? 3 times, and people are still sucking it up. worshipping a dead Jew on a stick as the co-equal of the God who created the universe. And they still want more of it because they want to go back to a time when Christians kicked ass, right? And exterminated large numbers of Jews in the Levant and Muslims, like it was nothing at all. That they were just sort of going down and, like some kind of human combine harvester, wading waist deep in blood. I seem to remember some of the descriptions, and these anti-Semites and Islamophobes, they want to go back to that because these Christian nationalists with their, imagery of Knights Templar, that's what they want to do to you. Jews and Muslims, that's what they want to return to. And Christine is, well, she's Catholic and she doesn't repent of idolatry. She can't prove or even argue convincingly that Jesus is God, but that's what she wants to believe, and nobody will be able to change her mind because her hatred of Jews and Muslims is greater than her love of truth and logic and morality. And she'll be voting for Liz Truss to be Prime Minister. You know, that warmongering cunt. So, on these principles is Britain run, all on hatred, on obsessions, and particularly ancestral hatreds and the refusal to acknowledge mistakes of the past. So I don't know what Effluent is saying. Obviously, I'm not a Christian because I'm not dumb enough to believe that a dead Jew on a stick is a co-equal of the God who created the universe. But you're open to considering that? Seeing how religions are created? You see, that's a non sequitur. And the interesting thing about, all these people that I talk to who come and post in my live chats is that they make no sense at all. And Effluent for you makes no sense most of the time. I don't know what he thinks he's on about. It's obviously an absurdity that a man could have created the universe, but he's prepared to entertain it. Why would he be prepared to entertain an arrant absurdity that he can't explain? I think the motivation must be to show hatred for Jews and hatred for Muslims who believe the opposite. But I see that most Westerners are really beyond reason now. They just believe what they want to believe, and nobody corrects them, and nobody is capable of correcting them, and nobody cares about correcting them because, well, either nobody cares about them or they just enjoy these people misleading themselves and confusing themselves with the nonsense that they claim to believe. So you could say that if you want to compare these two prophets, I mean, one was just a messenger and the other is God. And then you have to ask yourself, which do you think is true? And I guess a lot of these, Christians will say, we don't care what is true. You can't stop us from being Christian. You can't stop us from believing in our nonsense to show our hatred of truth and logic. Particularly if it comes from a non-Christian, non-Western source. So that's how their minds are arranged. And that's why they will not be able to prosper because they believe in nonsense. So Effluent for You says, I see contradictory themes in the story, in the quoted words of Jesus and the people. You see, I don't even know what this means. And the thing is, so many Westerners can't even express themselves clearly in their own language. And this means they are suffering from a learning disability or a mental health issue. And when most of your sentences are non sequiturs, making no sense, and when you are corrected, you just plough on as if you never, as if no correction was made. There's something wrong with you. Because if someone were to correct me on any claim I made, I would, well, I wouldn't be happy, of course, but then I would have to check it out. I would have to consult a higher authority to find out whether I am indeed wrong and, work on that basis. But not a bit of it in most of the people I talk about. I mean, Jay is a case in point. He keeps claiming he's a Christian, but he's never been confirmed. And he doesn't believe in the divinity of Jesus. He doesn't believe in the afterlife, but still he claims to be Christian. And this has been going on for years. The thing is, he doesn't care. He doesn't care what words mean. But interestingly, I can't find anybody who cares about the meaning of words, the proper definition of words, the proper definition of idolatry, the proper definition of woman, or any important, or justice, or blasphemy, or any racism. It's just no reaction. It is as if there's, as if it were, as if truth and reason were a corpse. So, what does Effluent for You mean? Yes, we went from stone temples to a human body. Who went from stone temples to a human body? What does it even mean? So obviously, in a logical world, we would credit the better person with a higher status. And that's why Islam says Jesus is but another prophet, but Muhammad is the final messenger, the last word from God, basically, the last word. So in concept, anyway, Islam is coherent, non-contradictory, written conceptually clear, with clear instructions. But these post-Christian Westerners, that they're not having any of it. Basically, they would rather die than admit that Christianity was a divine practical joke. Can we worship a divine practical joke? It's a tall order, isn't it? We worship a mistake that led so many astray and caused so much unnecessary bloodshed. We know it's unnecessary because nobody cares about the wars of the Reformation. Nobody believes in God now, hardly ever. Hardly anyone does, and they don't get it about the wars of the Reformation. They don't get it about the history of Christianity because it was never taught to them properly. But I have to say that when you think of a God that created the universe. If indeed he did, he created a system of rules that meant that the sin is its own punishment, which is, pretty impressive. He's saying, well, don't do these things. And if you do these things, I don't even have to personally punish you. Eventually, if you break the Noahide laws, your society will suffer. Well, maybe not immediately, not even within your generation, but many generations later, you will sink deeper and deeper into your moral sewage that you keep creating for yourself by disobeying these rules and disregarding perfectly good guidance because of your chauvinism and your anti-Semitism and your Islamophobia and your pride and your disobedience and your desire to show hatred to Jews and Muslims who have the better religion, who are at least more capable of being rightly guided. It's interesting also that Christians can't see that Christianity is the weakest link. Out of all the 5 world religions, it is Christianity that has been subsumed by liberalism, which in the 21st century only means sexual liberation from the rules of marriage and good parenting. And this explains Western degeneracy and the appalling stupidity and corruption and dishonesty and neurosis of most Westerners. The corruption is this. I know there is a conspiracy by these so-called dissident right. What do they dissent from? They dissent from liberalism, but they can't do anything about it. They want to go back to Christianity, some of them, and some of them want to try the neo-pagan idolatry of, the cooked up crap that they even admit to themselves they don't believe in, and which they know are derived from the extinct religions of pre-Christian deities. So nothing they do makes sense. And the other interesting thing about it is that they refuse to talk about it. They actually refuse to engage on the subject, which is the same thing as what liberals do. And not only that, they can't actually acknowledge that the question is important. And these are, so-called intellectuals like, Carl Benjamin and Dave the Distributist. And it is their intellectual dishonesty and moral cowardice that should be noted. Now, of course, they can, they have the bigger channel. They can keep ignoring me. And I suppose I will just have to appeal to an authority greater than they. They can talk as much nonsense as they like. But I think a few people are listening. Those people who have a religion, who have a system of beliefs and rules that they try to follow, which is more than, what Dave and Carl Benjamin are doing. Why do people listen to them? Or perhaps I don't listen to them. I don't think they even listen to them. Do they? But I did meet somebody that gives me hope. What was his name? Jason David or something. He seems interested in ideas, which gives me hope. Jason Wilson, that's his name. That woman says, I expect too much from people who have too little power or influence. Look, you don't have to. I don't expect you to do anything. I just expect you to acknowledge the truth. That's all, That would be a start. Just acknowledge that Christianity is kaput. And then all the thought processes that come from that conclusion will flow, and things will right itself. But if you remain forever in denial, then obviously your situation is not going to get any better. It's like a patient, it's like a person who's ill refusing to acknowledge that he's ill. And if you don't acknowledge you're ill, you're not going to go to the doctor. You're not going to seek a cure, are you? It is really as simple as that, which is why denial is also considered a neurosis. I mean, why do people remain in denial? It's been described as a feminine vice. Why are women prone to denial? Because they know they can't do anything about it. I guess fear, the worst mistake a woman could make is to marry the wrong man. And after having children by him, well, they've ruined themselves, haven't they? They can't abandon their children. If they abandon their children, they would be known as a bad mother. Nothing could be worse for a woman than to be known as being a bad mother. And what man would want somebody else's children in his home? So, she has to put up and shut up. That's why women have to deny that their husbands are unfaithful or whatever. But men are, in theory, capable of solving problems. I mean, that is really the difference. But when most men have turned into women, then they're just going to put up with shit, right? They're going to put up with shit until they die because they haven't got the courage to face the reality of their predicament, which is the failure of their religion, and they just hope to die before the fact is more generally acknowledged. And this is why I feel such contempt for them. Now, what about higher status people? Well, higher status people won't engage with me, will they? They're too scared, or too stupid, or too corrupt, whatever. So why are they so corrupt? Because they don't have a religion, right? They don't have a moral system that they can all agree is the official moral system. And so they all think what they like, they say what they like, they do what they like as their society slips into chaos and criminality. But what I'm pleased to say is that I think really it's the immigrants who would be more likely to solve the problem than the morally flaccid indigenous Europeans. Because at least these immigrants are capable of feeling shame. They would feel great shame being known as rats boarding a sinking ship. Particularly those who have children and who know that their children are going to be indoctrinated with transgenderism in the primary schools of the West. I mean, obviously, the people in the chat at the moment are unmarriageable bachelors who can't think straight, who can't accept the brutal facts of life, which is that Christianity is kaput because it is idolatry and cursed by God. But actually, Muslims, their presence in the West can be very helpful because these Muslims can't deny the existence of chapter 18, verse 4 of the Quran, which states that They are commanded to admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son, and they know they haven't done that at any time of their history. It doesn't count for one Muslim to say to some random Christian, some low-status Christian, that he's an idolater. No. Muslim leaders have to ask the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury how and why Christianity isn't idolatry and blasphemy. And when they predictably come up with the answer, it's not idolatry to worship Jesus. If Jesus is indeed God, then the obvious follow-up question is, how is Jesus God? When did that happen? Where's the authority for your proposition? It's so easy, it's an open goal, but these Muslims are too afraid to do it. So I have to do it. I have to do it on their behalf. As for these Jews, well, they haven't been doing it either, and they've been around for much longer than these Muslims. So what about these atheists? Are they getting it? Are they getting it that they don't have a religion, which is why their civilization is rotting before their eyes? Oh, well done, that woman. I don't know what Roblox is. I guess it's I can look it up, I suppose. I mean, really, historians of the future will have something to say about what we're going through now. What is particularly disgraceful is that, these so-called dissident right, they can't even deal with my question. I know they get it because I go on at them. I post in their chat. I even email them, so they know what I'm on about, and still they pretend not to know what I'm on about. So what is Roblox? It's an online game. Some video game, is it? Do you ban your children from Roblox, or are they? Oh, because it's what, it indoctrinates you into stupid things if you let them play the game. Oh, I don't know. What about China? What about China, Dr. Mengele? What happened with China? What are you referring to? You see, nobody can even formulate a sentence. It's like, I don't know what you're on about. Yes, Howard says it's the easiest thing for social media platforms and the like to delete anything we've ever posted. Or perhaps there'll be some hard copy somewhere. Perhaps some people will be interested enough to comment on it or write books about it. But this is mass psychosis, isn't it? When men are too frightened to even assert what is true, I mean, what's a penalty anyway? The penalty is that you get your account deleted. The penalty was far harsher in the olden days. People could get burned at the stake. They would get some kind of physical punishment or something, and get these Western men, and they can't even say what is obvious. They can't even university-educated men, people who got degrees in philosophy, and they can't discuss abstract ideas, and they can't even understand the concept of idolatry. You would have thought they know. It's like, well, what's idolatry? It's bowing before idols. What are these statues in churches? But idols of Jesus and Mary. Oh, but they're not idols. Well, what are they then? Yeah, the interesting thing about Jay is that he doesn't even care. I mean, okay, the most he can be doing is that, is Claire right? Am I a Christian? He could go to his local vicar if he could be bothered. What do you think the vicar would say? What do you think the Anglican vicar would say? They'd probably fob him off with some, yes and no answer, right? Because you can imagine the local vicar, if he does have one, will believe in that crap either, will he? Or she. It's usually a she these days. They don't even believe in God. So how do you expect them to believe that Jesus is God and is co-eternal, co-substantial, and co-equal? It's an impossibility. It's not just a matter of, you just have to go, the extra mile in becoming Christian. Not only do you have to believe in God, but you have to believe that Jesus is God, when most of them already deny God and refuse to believe in him. So this is something I hope Muslims in the West ask themselves, which is that these people are too morally flaccid to defend any principle, because they haven't got any. With what we've already established, they don't have a religion. They never believed in Christianity. Probably their parents and grandparents never really did anyway, and there are no rules to Christianity. The way it's constructed is to basically say to the subjects of Christian monarchs, shut up and pray to Jesus. Don't worry about the rights and wrongs of things. As long as you keep praying to Jesus, you'll get to heaven. So shut up, peasant. That's how it's been for so many centuries. But they like going back to the Crusades because they like fantasizing about how much fun it must have been to go around the Levant and slaughter large numbers of Jews and Muslims. That's what they fantasize about. So there's no hope for these people, not really. Anyway, they're not about to become married fathers. And the fact that most of them are not married fathers means that the transgenderism rollout in the primary schools of the West will proceed apace, with no pushback from the so-called men who have more or less turned into women with penis extensions that they might wish to remove when they want to actually become women. So back to the subject of the stream, which is about comparing the relative achievements. So it depends on what you want. Obviously, if you think, oh, it's a great thing to get all these Christians to worship me as a co-equal, the God who created the universe. It's like, well, it's great. It's quite an achievement, isn't it, getting them to believe this nonsense for so long. But then, well, Jesus was probably a narcissist if he's, pleased at this accomplishment. Actually, if Jesus is as guilty as charged, then he has a lot to answer for according to the Torah, because the Torah says that it is death for you if you instigate a community to practice idolatry. So I guess, Jesus could theoretically be guilty of causing all these Christians to be sent to hell for believing in the arrant nonsense that Jesus is God. So, well, maybe the Jews and the Talmud are right about boiling eternally in excrement. If that is what is, well, is he guilty of that or not? Was he properly convicted or not? And whether or not he was properly convicted of blasphemy, the fact is that Christians have been worshipping him for 2,000 years. So there's no way of getting round that. Well, if God exists, I suppose he will. I think the idea is that Muhammad is a greater prophet because he was entrusted with a message that would be the law of humanity, because they have nothing better. Because logically, there is nothing better, is there? There's nothing better than the Quran. Is there a better available guide to humanity other than the Quran? I haven't heard of it. Nobody ever says what they think it is if they don't agree with me that the Quran is the best available guide to humanity. So, on the question of which prophet has a greater achievement, it depends on your standpoint. It depends on whether God exists or not. I guess if God doesn't exist, then you think, yeah, it's a great achievement to get all those fools to worship you as God, as the God who created the universe for 2,000 years. That's an enormous achievement. Think of all the people who didn't get to heaven because of their beliefs, right? If you want to think of, hell being stuffed with Christians because of their idolatry and blasphemy, I suppose, yeah, that's a great achievement. But if you want order and justice, or the greater likelihood of order and justice, then I guess you'd have to vote for the guy who brought you the book of rules that would improve your society if you could be made to follow it. So it all depends on whether God exists. And I know most people deny the existence of God. And most people are narcissists who would think it was, it would be a pretty fine trick to get all these fools to believe that Jesus is in fact God and get sent to hell for it in their afterlife. So thank you for your attention.